Hello, this is The Way I See It presentation comparing photographers Robert Mapplethorpe and E.J. Bellick. Robert Mapplethorpe was a photographer who was working in the 70s. A lot of his work featured celebrities and flowers, but he is well known for the more controversial, erotic images that he produced during his time. He captured a lot of punk and queer culture before he died of AIDS-related complications at the height of the epidemic. E.J. Bellick was a photographer from the early 1900s whose photographs were not recognized until 19 years after his death. Little is known about him or what inspired his work, but what is known is that he made at least 89 portraits, all of which were entitled of sex workers working in a brothel located in Louisiana. So these are two images created by the photographers. The image on the left is titled Bryce Martin, named after the subject who was an artist during the time Mapplethorpe was working. On the right is an image of a woman from Louisiana. These images were taken about 66 years apart, which is apparent when looking at the image quality of the images. The image on the right suffered a bit more due to the changes in time, but we can't see enough of the work to see the similarities between them. Both images seem to have light coming in from the right side, which I would argue is probably natural lighting coming in from a window. Both subjects seem very relaxed in their pose, sitting very similarly to one another with one leg over the other. What you will also see in much of their work is both photographers worked in black and white. For Mapplethorpe, that was more of an aesthetic choice because he wanted to give his work a classical look, whereas Bellick was just working with the technology of his time. Also, I should mention on the next slide, there is very heavy sexual content in the work, so just small warning. The image on the left is a photo taken by Mapplethorpe, which features a man in rubber draped over a bench. On the right, Bellick has a woman who is lounging on a couch. Both images are very different from one another. Mapplethorpe's figure is fully clothed in a bare room, not an inch of skin in sight, whereas Bellick's woman is in the nude, wearing nothing but stockings and a mask in the room that sort of resembles my aunt's house in New Jersey. However, compositionally, they are very similar due to the way the figures horizontally divide the image in half. Due to this positioning, they automatically capture the viewer's eyes, which is further emphasized by the contrasting tones between the figures and the space around them. In the photo on the right, the woman is the brightest part of the image, and her skin tone pops against the dark backdrop of the room. Similarly, Mapplethorpe uses contrasting tones to move the viewer's gaze straight to the person in rubber. They are very much calling attention to sexual behaviors and lifestyles, but they also do the same thing in that they hide the subject's identity with a mask of some sort. These images are a lot more tame in comparison to the last ones. They both feature women who are posed with their hands behind their backs, head tilted to one side, and both are wearing white. Mapplethorpe's photo of Cindy Sherbin on the right is more out of focus than Bellick's image of the woman from Louisiana. And this is because Mapplethorpe wanted some of his images to look a little older, so he added certain effects, so it kind of gave off the out of focus filter that you would see in some older photography. And the subjects look very much like they are interacting with us as the viewer. They're looking straight into the camera, and it's creating this illusion of interaction between us and them, which sort of feels like a conversation of sorts, or maybe even a confrontation. And I wanted to put these two images by the photographers side by side because there is a power that these images hold similar to the ones in the last slide. The subject is looking directly at the camera and creating that interaction again. When exploring Mapplethorpe's work, he does try to showcase queer individuals and does not shy away from any sexual content, as you will see. He very much disagreed with the idea that his images were shocking, despite the fact that they were often depicted in the nude, and many people had problems with his work when it was coming out. A quote by the artist is, "I don't think that there's much of a difference between a photograph of a fist up someone's blank and a photograph of carnations in a bowl." His approach was very much, "Hey, look at this very normal act that no one should feel ashamed about." And in that thinking, he very much normalizes these intimate acts, like getting undressed in the way that the young man in the image is. Much of Bellick's work as well does not shy away from sex. Many images found of his showcase the female form, which was also very controversial for anyone of his time, especially given the fact that his subjects were sex workers, which is also something that's still seen as very controversial and taboo in many cultures today. These images are just more side by sides of their work to just show the similarities in the posing and the content that they're using while displaying. This is another of Bellick's work that I wanted to showcase because it does have a more modern feel, despite it being from the early 1900s, that juxtaposes Mapplethorpe's techniques very well because he uses techniques that make his work look older. So there's less of that gap in the time that they were being made. And I do recommend looking into their work some more. I don't feature a lot of the very heavy sexual content in this presentation, but if you're someone who wants to look into that more, they are very interesting artists to look at, and they are both very controversial, but they're worth looking into. And that was my presentation.